There we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the wearej6.com Saturday live stream. We are always grateful to have everybody join us at these broadcasts. And we're very excited about the panel we have today for you. Some pretty exciting angles on what's going on coming from, we have Joe Biggs from the Proud Boys. We have Steve Friend, formerly of the FBI, and a whistleblower there, and James Fishback with some very interesting perspective on the politics and the economics of the situation. So we're going to dive into this, but as always, we're going to begin by acknowledging Almighty God and inviting him into this space because we truly are one nation under God. And in my humble opinion, the loss of that concept and reality is at the heart of all the chaos and destruction that we're talking about these days. So with that, we're just going to pray and ask God to bless this time and be a part of it. Heavenly Father, we come to you in sincerity and in humility, and just acknowledge that you are God, that you're in control, and that's a good thing. We're very grateful for that. But God, we ask you to fill this time and this space in the way that only you can. We ask your Holy Spirit to really dwell in the hearts and minds of each person on this panel, and of course, in the hearts and minds of everyone that's watching and participating. God, we just ask for your wisdom. We certainly ask for your mercy and comfort for those who are hurting. In the J6 community, there are so many that are still devastated, destitute. Many are homeless. Folks are hurting in a real, practical, meaningful way. And you call us to care for those who are suffering. So we do. And God, we just invite you into that mix and into that conversation. We ask for your providence, for your grace, your love over those folks that are hurting and over our nation. God, we truly love this nation. We truly love the principles of liberty and justice that it is founded on. And those come from you, God. We recognize that. We thank you for that. We thank you for this time and for each person participating. And in our Heavenly Father's name, we pray. Amen. Amazing. So you guys, really, you can all jump in at any time. We have a very interesting mix. I usually just preface at the top of the stream to remind us, who we are, what is wearej6.com. And I do see in the comments here, where's Dr. Gold? So wearej6.com is a strategic alliance. It's not a 501c3 or anything like that. It's just a First Amendment free association of persons, interested in similar ideas. The steering committee that put it together includes myself, Dr. Gold, Brandon Struck, and Derek Evans. And they were all busy and tied up today, so I'm holding down the fort. But wearej6.com is a platform that we wanted to support and create and connect to allow everyone who is affected by J6 to connect and support and advance the goals. When I say everyone affected by J6, in my view, that's every American citizen, because J6 was the tip of a weaponized government spear that devastated 1,600, roughly 1,600 citizens and their families, but have implications that exceed far beyond that to everyone in this country. So we built this platform to try to connect all of those people, connect various ideas, and pursue what we call restorative justice. So I always want to get other people's opinions and perspectives on what restorative justice is, what it involves, how we might accomplish that. Joe is a J6 patriot. That's how I call a J6 former defendant, now exonerated by President Trump's bold and correct action. And of course, Steve from the FBI has a very interesting perspective on this. And James, we're excited to get your take as well. So Joe, do you want to give just a kind of a brief summary of who you are as a J6 former defendant, what brought you into this mess, and kind of your current perspective on what restorative justice means and where we are in that mix?
Yeah, I'm Joe Biggs, a former U.S. Army veteran.
Joe, I think Iraq and Afghanistan. Audio. Just check your settings there and see if it's connecting. Steve and James, do we have your audio working?
I've got Joe going just fine.
We do. Okay, so
Yeah.
apparently maybe I just can't hear it. That's funny. 1 second here. Test the audio.
They said in the comments they can hear me too.
Okay, I can hear you now too. I apologize for that glitch. It happens.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so I'm Joe Biggs. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. I got out, became a journalist. I covered stuff at the border, went over into cartel areas on my own. I've gone into ISIS hot spots on my own after the Paris attacks. I went with the French police and chased them all the way up into Saint Denis and then over and into Belgium. So I've been around crazy stuff, and never in my entire life did I expect to ever end up in prison for simply going to an event that the president said, "Hey, come to this event," and that
makes two of us.
Yeah, and get set up and somehow walk into an open door and be charged and then convicted of seditious conspiracy. I still haven't gotten a pardon. I was only commuted, so only there's 14 or 15 of us that did not get that, and they consider us to be the quote unquote bad guys of the whole day. So there's still quite a few of us that haven't received those pardons. So I can't go to the VA now. I don't have health care. My daughter doesn't have health care now. I can't even go to her school and take her on a field trip because I'm a convicted felon and a terrorist. So, it's definitely not been an easy route. It's day by day, but it is what it is. I got my, my head on my shoulders and keeping hope alive. We'll see what happens.
I love it. Joe, you immediately strike me as very sincere, very decent and reasonable as a human, very authentic as an American with classic American values that resonate with me and that I grew up in my family, understanding to be very important and something we learn and teach and protect. Liberty, justice, meritocracy, the opportunity to succeed by hard work and good character. That's what I hear when I listen to you as we got to know each other a little bit, which I think is fascinating. And it seems that a big part of J6 and a big part of a lot of things we're fighting involve information warfare and lies and mischaracterizations of who people are. So I was really excited to have you on, to have people watching and learning about who is wearej6.com and what is this whole conversation about restorative justice. And some people commonly say, "Oh, J6 is annoying. We need to get past it. We're tired of this." And people will say that about a lot of things. They're tired of the COVID lies and we want to get past the lab leak and everything else. But of course, going past something in that manner means sweeping it under the rug. And that's never a good thing. That's never helpful. But Steve, as an FBI, former FBI agent and someone with that perspective, what do you see in terms of that information warfare and the misrepresentation of the truth about who people are? I think that's a big part of what's going on with J6, and it's why we wanted to create these persecution testimonial videos so people learn who these folks are and what actually happened to them. What have you been seeing, from your side of things on that level?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. So I like to refer to myself as a recovering FBI agent. 950 days indefinitely suspended forever by the FBI. I think that it's important to know, and I think it's been laid bare, particularly as it pertains to January 6th, just how much the information war went on with that. I mean, the crux of the whistleblowing complaint that I brought forward pertained to January 6th, but it was because it was the most emblematic example that I could come up with. And the most extreme example of what has gone on there for a very long time. And that is the fact that they manipulate what they do, and they manipulate the way that they do their work so that the American people have a false perception of not only what they do, but who the bad guys are. And they found this case, and I heard multiple times, this is our 9/11. Now, that doesn't mean what most people interpret it to mean, like it's the most important case. It's the most important case for people to personally profit, for the organization to grow in material and funding and capabilities, which is why they jumped all over January 6th. And I host a podcast, and one of the things I did recently was a deep dive a couple of episodes ago about the ODNI classified documents that Tulsi Gabbard released a week ago, and I was very interested in it. There was some, I don't know, a little bit of murmurings within the influencer space, within media, but then it just kind of faded away. It's a 15-page document. It was the playbook for what went on and what January 6th was an example of for 4 years under the Biden administration, where they were able to manipulate this one incident and turn one incident into thousands of examples, spread it around the country, and somehow connect it to racially motivated violent extremism, which means white supremacy, even though it was a dispute over an election between two white guys. And then we extrapolate that and are able to hit our quotas, get bonuses for the senior executives within the agency, and then message to the American people, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, that white supremacy is on the rise around the country because of a 4-hour disruption of the certification of the election on one day in one location.
It's really Orwellian. It's even for me, I pay very close attention to all these things, and it's disorienting the way that they just manipulate terminology to get your attention about something that seems you should be worried about or care about, and just really flip it on its head.
And let me add to that. I mean, there was something that you saw January 6th become an example of, and it was a new term du jour, because the FBI, federal law enforcement, the DOJ, it's Skynet from the Terminator. Skynet in the Terminator, seriously, analogy, okay? It's a artificial intelligence system, not good and not bad, ones and zeros, becomes self-aware, and it comes to the inevitable conclusion that anyone who wants to turn it off is the enemy. So it attacks the humans, which is why we get 2 really good movies and the rest we want to pretend never got made.
Right.
That sounds a lot like a bureaucracy. That is the FBI post 9/11, a bureaucracy whose goal it is to grow, get more funding, more material, more capabilities, inevitably coming to the conclusion that its enemies are people who want to curb that, who want to shut down that, maybe limit it in some way, which is why they will shape and evolve their mission set away from legitimate bad actors protecting the American people against fraud and force, and they will just come after the people who are the true enemies to its mission to grow, which tends to be small government people. And that's why they have the new term du jour, which is connected to January 6th, and that is an anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremist, agave, which in May of 2021, very early in the Biden administration, there was a strategic intelligence assessment and data issued by the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security jointly. And it defined an anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremism as someone with a perception of government overreach or negligence or illegitimacy. Those are ors, not and alsos, ors. So wearing a face diaper on an airplane, that could be government overreach. Oh, domestic terrorism.
Right.
Allowing 30 million illegals to flood across the border, that could be negligence. Oh, that's terrorism. Having questions about an election outcome where we went to bed at midnight and one guy had won it and then woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and the other guy had won it. That's illegitimacy. That's a terrorist. That's what we saw on full display, and that's why thousands of people were rung through the ringer.
Yeah, you just described in very specific detail this idea of information warfare, psychological warfare, and these psyops that are being perpetrated against Americans. Certainly, as in particular with the intelligence community apparatus that over decades was designed to supposedly, engage in conflicts or political issues outside of the country, and then has been turned inward against American citizens. And I no better example of that than the way that the FBI was weaponized against J6ers. James, do you have any perspective on where we are at right now in terms of what Steve just mentioned and what Joe and myself and many others have experienced? It's just a very troubling time, and of course, President Trump won, thank God, and we all worked very, very hard together as a country on that for some time. And now we're in a very interesting period where a lot of new things are happening, a lot of potentially exciting things are happening, but some very concerning things are happening or not happening. And, Steve will jump in on that further in a moment. But in terms of this concept of restorative justice, and again, not just for J6ers, but for the heart and soul of the issue itself that is at the heart of this, because that affects every American citizen. Where do you see America currently in the arc of hopefully starting to learn the truth about J6 and what it means, and that continued investigative effort? Because we certainly believe restorative justice is not possible without the truth, and it's hard to get the truth without investigating it, especially with the amount of government opposition and subversion and deceit and everything else that Steve was describing.
Well, thanks for having me, John. Thanks for having me. I want to read something, actually, that I think we would all agree with.
Yeah.
Quote, "In the United States of America, men are not subjected to criminal punishment because their conduct offends our patriotic emotions or thwarts a general purpose sought to be effected by specific commands which they have not disobeyed, nor are they to be held guilty of offenses which the statutes have omitted, though by inadvertence to define and condemn. Our commitment to equal justice and the rule of law requires the courts to faithfully apply criminal laws as written, even in periods of national crisis, and even when the conduct alleged is indisputably abhorrent." Now, who wrote that? Who wrote that? This, I think, gets to the heart of where we are with the movement that you're describing. That was written by Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. When she agreed in a 7-2 opinion with the conservative majority that the Department of Injustice weaponized Sarbanes-Oxley, specifically 1512c2, against peaceful protesters on January 6th. This is why I'm saying we have to stop apologizing. And I'm sorry, there's so many conservatives in this movement, to your point, John, that want to move on from January 6th. We can't move on from January 6th. We can't move on from COVID. And the reason why is because the truth strikes to the heart of where we are as a country, that we are selectively prosecuting people. That's right. Like President Trump was selectively prosecuted for documents, allegedly. The same documents, by the way, that President Biden had stuffed in the glove compartment of a Corvette, he did not have the authority to unilaterally declassify. So if anybody wants to come to us and say, why are you keep talking about this? Or, well, this is such an abhorrent thing. Ketanji Brown Jackson sided with the conservatives, saying that the Department of Injustice weaponized these particular criminal statutes against the January 6th protesters. Now, interestingly enough, it was a 6-3 decision, and Amy Coney Barrett
betrayed us.
Once again, not just betrayed us, but betrayed the country, betrayed the equal application of the law. This is not going to win me many friends on the conservative side, but let me just say this. If the exact facts were that Joe Biden's supporters had tried to get into the Capitol, BLM and Antifa were there, and they were largely peaceful. As we know, January 6th protesters were almost exclusively, in the words of Michelle Obama, largely, vast majority, right, 99.9, Michelle Obama would say a largely peaceful protest. That if BLM had done the exact same thing that conservatives had done on January 6th, it would have been just as abhorrent to have the Department of Injustice selectively use criminal statutes to hunt people down, to have federal agents like Steve Friend, a good friend of mine in Northeast Florida, go bust down somebody's door with a rifle and take them into custody and subject them to awful, awful conditions. It would have been just as wrong for that to be applied to conservatives, to be applied to progressives. It doesn't matter. And so that's why we're continuing to talk about this issue, because it strikes at the core of the equal application of the law. There are a lot of Democrats I know, John, they would never say this publicly, but they are repulsed by what the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, did, by what Matthew Graves, who's an absolute sicko, did in Washington, D.C. And this is why, just to go to the U.S. Attorney in D.C., this is why we need to confirm someone like Ed Martin. Because what Matthew Graves did wasn't just at the expense of the innocent protesters on January 6th. It was the expense of single moms and of kids who were gunned down in Washington, D.C. when Matthew Graves used the finite resources of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. to go after and hunt down peaceful protesters, when he could have used those resources to throw gangbangers in prison for federal firearms and federal carjacking charges, when that city was unsafe for 4 years because he misdirected resources. That's, everyone is a victim of what happened. Republican, Democrat, black, white, whether you voted for Trump or you find him insufferable, everyone in this country is really a victim, right, of what happened on January 6th. And it was, of course, President Kennedy who said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. That is the truth of what happened. And just wanted to speak that this afternoon.
No, excellent, James. Thank you for sharing that. What a powerful quote coming from Jackson Brown, who normally I am shocked by how nonsensical and just ridiculous she seems to be. But she got it right on that occasion.
She got it right. And because, and I got to give her credit, I didn't support her. And I didn't support her in that little Montgomery oral arguments earlier this week.
I was there.
You were there. But I got to tell you, she got it right because this is such a nonsensical, such a common sense thing. You don't use federal criminal statutes like 1512C2 from Sarbanes-Oxley, which, by the way, was about accounting fraud, not about obstructing an official proceeding. By the way, when a certain U.S. congressman pulled a fire alarm, why wasn't he hit with 1512C2? Right. So you either use it on everybody or you use it on nobody. I would much prefer you use it on nobody than to selectively apply it to conservatives. And by the way, it would be just as abhorrent if it was selectively used on any other political or ideological group.
The true irony or just sad fact about the Sarbanes-Oxley law is that it was basically ginned up in a weaponized fashion for the Enron case to begin with. The genesis of that law was to create a fracture between an accounting firm and Enron because they wanted to flip the accounting firm. And the Supreme Court, ironically, overturned it. But at that point, Arthur Andersen was no longer a going concern. And I think I would like to see obstruction of official proceeding applied to FBI agents who decided to stand to the Attorney General and the FBI Director and say, we're not going to turn over the Epstein client list, or we're not going to turn over the list of agents who worked on January 6th. That seems like an obstruction of official proceeding. Why aren't they embracing it?
Great question. When I was in prison myself because of 1512C2, I came across a great book that I urge all Americans to read, 3 Felonies a Day by litigator Harvey Silverglate, which you guys I'm sure are familiar with. It's a fascinating book. It actually breaks down 1512 and the Enron scandal, and I realized the whole thing was a farce at that point, which is just ironic. But even if you just take the law for what it supposedly is, James, you were correct to note the issue with selective prosecution, which was a huge aspect of January 6th, and of course 1512C2, but I'm not sure what's worse. In addition to the terrible danger and evil of selective prosecution, a total violation of equal protection, it is also a huge problem if laws are used entirely in conflict with the plain written meaning and the supported intent of the legislature that wrote them. So with 1512, when it was signed into law by George Bush, the president at the time, at the signing, he said, I want it to be really clear that this is not to be used against political protesters. I'm paraphrasing, but he was that literal about it. He don't get mistaken somewhere down the road that you're going to use this law to criminalize political protest. And then that's exactly what happened. So even if they used 1512C2 against J6ers and against BLM protesters, it would still be bull. It would still be complete nonsense. It would be wrong and evil. And we need to talk about that. We need to deal with
if they would have charged me with a murder, I would have been convicted of murder. It really didn't matter. The only thing that they had to do was get us in front of a judge. Once we had handcuffs on us and we were within the prison system, it was it. That's all they had to do because they already had all the judges bought off. You know, Judge Kelly, Timothy Kelly, who was presided over our trial, when we had our first detention hearing. When I was first arrested, I was put on house arrest. I had an ankle monitor. And then a week later, we had a detention hearing. It was all done over Skype. And the prosecution, the AUSA guy, comes out and goes, "Hey, I got this video to show you. This is definitive proof that Mr. Biggs is a violent offender and he destroyed property on January 6th. And they play the video, and Judge Timothy Kelly goes, "Are you stupid? Like, what is this? Like, if this is the kind of evidence you're going to bring me, this is going to be over." And he said, "No, you're not going to go to jail. This is ridiculous." Well, they had another detention hearing a few weeks later. Same video was brought, and Judge Timothy Kelly goes, "You're a terrorist. You're going to jail." So, that shows you how they got to these judges. And, it doesn't matter. They could have charged me with anything. They could have charged me with possession of some type of like ricin or something like that. I would have been convicted of it because we were refused our right to be able to move it to a place where we'd have a jury of our peers. We're all forced to go to trial in D.C., and every single juror said that they hoped we were buried under the prison. So, there was just absolutely no chance at all whatsoever.
One of the best parts that you mentioned, 3 felonies a day. One of the best comments I think that Harvey Silverglate makes in that book is just a simple question: why do we have laws? Mm-hmm. Do we have laws to ensure that there's a social compact between we, the people, the citizens of the country, and our government, that we have a civil society so that we have a mechanism to protect innocent people from fraud and force against evildoers? Or is it just another mechanism? Is it another arrow in the quiver of the government to go after someone for a new and novel reason? Like, if the receiver catches the ball and gets his foot down before he hits the white line, that's called inbounds. So for a prosecutor or a member of the DOJ to look at someone and say, "Hey, you're getting close to that line there. Maybe I should redraw the line behind your feet so it looks like you're out of bounds." Whereas the reason we really do have laws is if you're close to the line, you know what that's called? Legal. It's not a business of the government to go after you for that with a new and novel perspective. And now that we have this infiltration that we've seen on full display when the masks are completely ripped off, particularly over the last 15 years since the Obama administration, where there's a Marxist communist infiltration of our government, their directive is to reward their friends and punish their enemies. And they will reinterpret the law however they need in order to use the powers that they have.
Absolutely. I referenced John Locke in the book that I'm writing right now, Patriot Plea. John Locke, of course, historical authority on natural law that the founders studied extensively as they built the republic that we now live in. And John Locke says the end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. For in all the states of created beings capable of laws, where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law. So I think that's the general common sense boundaries that you mentioned, Steve, that we all agree as a society should be in place to protect everyone. But then the problem becomes that people in positions of authority and power abuse and exploit that power by manipulating boundaries to accomplish an agenda rather than maintain justice and fairness and safety within the acceptable common sense boundaries, right? And that's what Harvey Silverglate illuminated in that book about the justice system. This applies to the FBI as well, right? You've got prosecutors that we can see in January 6th very clearly, and then you can see FBI and other agencies in the same way, where in both cases their job, their purpose is supposed to be justice. It's supposed to be seeking truth, fairness, and equality. But instead, what they care about is personal ambition, personal gain, so racking up numbers. A prosecutor employed by the state should not see success as getting a conviction. They should see success as determining truth and establishing justice.
The success is the process. Is this thing called due process that we have, right? That's what we're calling, instead of a Maryland Mound, now his name is due process. But in reality, due process is the goal of law enforcement. You gather the facts and you present them. As a prosecutor takes the facts to trial and there's a conviction, that means that the facts that were collected supported the conviction. It wasn't because you're such a great darn lawyer. If the person gets acquitted at trial, it means that the facts did not support a conviction. It doesn't mean that you lost. It's just a statement on the facts. The success for you, if you're an FBI agent, if you're a federal prosecutor, is that you followed the process. Your career is not a baseball card with stats on the back of it.
Yeah, one of the comments was it'd be very awesome if these federal trials were televised. And there's a reason they don't televise federal trials, because it's all a scam. I've never been through anything like this before. So I'm sitting here knowing that I didn't do what they're saying that I did. And to watch the judge go, well, we're going to take this exculpatory evidence, which, exonerates you, and we're not going to allow that in. But we're going to take this guy who, when the FBI kicked in his door, had like 5 weapons that he shouldn't have had because he was already a convicted felon. And we've got him to change the story to say that you did it. We're going to let his false statement come in, and we're going to use that to put the final nail in the coffin. If people could have seen our trial, they would have demanded that they released us then and there. People would have probably rioted because it was so stupid and ridiculous. It was the biggest waste of money and time, because their evidence was like, look, this guy who's in the Proud Boy has Proud Boy coins at his house. He's got a T-shirt that says Proud Boys. He's got to be guilty, and it's like, really? Like, where's the evidence of me breaking down the door? Let's see it. Well, we don't have anything like that. But by the end of the trial, you're going to see a clear and precise plan by Joe Biggs to overthrow the Capitol. And then at the end of the trial, they go, well, there wasn't a plan, but look at the guy. He looks like a white supremacist racist. And the jury's like, yeah, he's guilty.
Yeah, and Joe, if I may, I think this is exactly right. Let's make no mistake. Kyle Rittenhouse would have been convicted had that trial not been televised. Joe, I believe that you would not have been convicted if that trial had not been had been televised.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because look, think about this. Bill Ackman, who is a friend of mine, who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, who just recently came around to President Trump and his vision for the country. He had this epiphany watching the Rittenhouse trial, saying, this kid just defended himself. I think a lot of people did. I think we all saw it for what it was and when we knew it was happening, right? But that trial of Kyle Rittenhouse really opened people's eyes to what happened. And I agree with you 100%, Joe. Let's make these federal trials, televise them, make it very clear, because Timothy Kelly would not have pulled those shenanigans. The prosecutors, the U.S. Attorney's Office would not have pulled those shenanigans. Ultimately, everyone's accountable to the public. They got to go home. They're going to hear tweets. They're going to hear stories about them. But the number of Democrats that really turned for Kyle Rittenhouse simply after watching the facts come out in trial, that I think is what, sunlight's the best disinfectant. So I would absolutely be open for that.
Yeah, I mean, his peers, Judge Kelly's peers, would have mocked him and been like, are you serious? Like, you're really doing this? Like, it holds the people who are like, what is the judge doing? He's trying to hold me accountable for my supposed crimes, right? But if you've got everybody watching him, he can't play. He can't.
That's right.
He can't sell out. And you're holding him accountable now, and that's what we got to do. We got to have cameras in there.
I agree, 100%.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's a very powerful component of restorative justice that we can continue to demand and articulate to the country as we continue to seek to educate them about what's going on, as a specific element of achieving restorative justice and just elevating the pursuit of justice for all Americans is accountability. And specifically, there's no real good excuse for not allowing viewership and oversight of federal trials. That's huge. Another one, of course, is the change of venue, which was absurd. That gets to a whole nother topic that we could discuss or leave for another time. But in my opinion, the DC court district should not exist. It should be defunded entirely and abolished. I think it's absurd that we have such a district in the court system there. But to the extent that we still have one, you certainly need viable mechanisms for seeking relief from political bias.
You know how bad the spin was? I was in the same prison, because I was in solitary confinement for 2 years straight. I was going through my trial the same time they just picked up the Lockerbie bomber. And when I would be brought out of my cell and brought to the prison transportation van from Alexandria Detention Center to DC to go to trial, they'd have to pull him aside because they said I was too dangerous to be near him, and they were worried for his safety. A man who blew up a plane and killed people. And I'm a guy who walked into a door that was open with 2 hot Italian chicks. You know, so.
And change of venue, is interesting because particularly to January 6th, it's one incident that happens in one location, Washington, D.C. So instead of opening up one case with whoever you wanted to investigate, they open a separate case at the FBI for every single person. So now we've turned one case into 2,400 cases. But they didn't officially run them out of Washington, D.C. They set up a task force there that was calling shots. But officially, on paper, wherever the person lived is the office that had theoretical control of that case. So they changed the venue for the investigation. So if somebody lived where I lived in Daytona and went to the Capitol, then that was a Daytona Beach office was investigating on behalf of the FBI Jacksonville field office. So now we have a domestic terrorist in Jacksonville. So that's a political narrative. They were able to say, look at the map, look at all these white supremacists around the country. But they felt comfortable changing the venue for where to investigate them. So shouldn't there therefore be a comfort at changing the venue for where to prosecute them? Because if we have to have all hands on deck, why weren't the federal prosecutors in the Middle District of Florida bringing that case where there was actually going to be a jury of their peers? Because they knew they had a gulag and a star chamber up in Washington, D.C. And then you even take into the fact that it's such a weird, quirky district because everything there is federal, but they still have the ability to do superior court or district court. Superior would be more analogous to like a local county court. But the federal prosecutor there decided to, no, we're going to take them to big boy federal court. So all of those discretionary decisions were made along the way because they were not interested in the process. They wanted the outcome, and that's exactly what they did. And then that's why I'm going to continue to rail on this. At this point in 2021, when we had a brand new president, brand new attorney general, there were over 400 January 6ers in custody. We're almost 100 days into the new administration, new FBI director, new attorney general, and we are relying on a couple of rogue judges to be the first scalps on the wall over this weekend. Two. Completely unacceptable.
Yeah,
completely.
It's there's so many different ways that the government is abused and weaponized against people. It's fascinating to see. They exploited or they utilized an ability to change jurisdiction when it suited their purpose with the FBI investigations, but then refused to entertain any request for change of venue for the adjudication with clear political issues affecting it. I want to highlight this FBI story that's happening here. Let me pull this up for everybody and get your guys' take. Steve, we have your tweet here about Steve Jensen, which I want to get your take on that in a moment. But we also have this guy, John Sullivan, who just put out a political ad running for Congress. This is quite outrageous. So there's two aspects here. One is the continued corruption and distrust affecting the FBI as an institution and how it's behaving. But then there's also the lingering issue of J6 as a political weapon that has far from been dulled. I mean, it is still the point of the spear. And so when people say we need to move on, I think this is kind of laughable and ridiculous. They're certainly not moving on. They're still stabbing us with this thing. So take a look at this.
It is coming from inside the White House. I had to leave the FBI and step forward so I can finally tell. We're up against some serious threats right now. From skyrocketing costs to Trump and billionaires corrupting our government. And I can't just sit on the sidelines and watch. Because for 17 years, I was an FBI intelligence analyst, working in secret to keep us safe from global threats and the insurrectionists who stormed our Capitol.
The insurrectionists that stormed our Capitol. I mean, you can literally hear the mockery in his voice as he says it. It's what do you guys think of that?
He's not a secret agent, just like every special agent for the FBI. He was an intelligence analyst, but they have this idea that I'm a secret agent. I could have to work in the shadows. And really, like, I'll be straight up with you. Like, the first thing that comes to my mind when I see that is 18 United States Code 2252. That's federal law. That's about prohibiting knowingly possessing, distributing, and receiving child pornography. That is straight out of central casting. I want to know what's on that guy's devices.
Yeah, he definitely comes across as very creepy. So I'd be totally willing to believe you there. But just taking what he says at face value, I'm going to go to Congress because I got to fight against fascist Trump and the insurrectionists that tried to take over your government. This is still the narrative. This is still the story.
It's still the reality with Stephen Jensen.
Right.
Stephen Jensen was the section chief atop of DTOS, Domestic Terrorism Operations Section, by his own testimony to Congress. He was the architect of the way that the FBI investigated January 6th. He's the J6 warlord. Then he was a problem child, so they did what they always did, and they laundered him through the training unit. They moved him over to Quantico, Virginia for a little while, then promoted him to special agent in charge in Columbia, South Carolina. Then we got new director, new deputy director, and they had somebody whisper in their ear, hey, this is a good company, man. I'm sure they didn't do their proper vetting, and they made him the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office, the ADIC there. This is a stab in the back. And then at first we got, well, that's fake news. It's New York Times. And then my buddies and I were able to produce the email that Stephen Jensen put out saying, hey, I'm glad to be the boss here in Washington field office now. And we had to quickly pivot over to, well, no, it's not fake news. It's true news, but it's actually a good thing because he knows where the bodies are buried. I'm sorry. He's like 5 derivatives away from actually doing the actual investigations. If he knows where the bodies are buried, they would be people theoretically above him. But since he was at the top, and he was the architect, then let's just play fiction. Let's say he knows that it was secretly a plot that Nancy Pelosi and Harry Dunn cooked up together, and he's going to give it over. If that's true, and he knew that, and he knows where the bodies are buried, then the deal that's struck is, okay, Stephen Jensen, thank you for this. The deal is you don't go to prison as long.
Right.
And when we'll take that information. Not you get promoted 3 times, and now from that post, you're going to be a good company man. By that logic, if you knew where the bodies were buried and you get promoted, then we should just make Christopher Wray in charge of the FBI. We should make Alejandro Mayorkas in charge of the Secretary of Homeland Security. They know where the bodies are buried after all. Let's just elevate them. In fact, let's put Joe Biden back in the White House.
I feel like we have just a bunch of selfie takers right now running these agencies. You know, they're more concerned with putting out trendy little videos and wearing their new vests and look at me, we've got these files coming out tomorrow, stay tuned. And then tomorrow comes and it's like, well, we deported some people. And it's like, oh, cool. Well,
no, we arrested a member of Tren de Aragua, a leader, who was arrested in Colombia by Colombian officials on a PAW, which means that it was an 18 to 24-month negotiation between the United States State Department and the Colombian counterparts in order to arrange that, which means it started under the Joe Biden administration. But we have an FBI director walking out there and taking credit and hurting himself in the shoulder, patting himself on the back.
Yeah.
It briefs well. People aren't actually reading the details, and they think, oh, whoa, we're getting these gangbangers. Oh, look, we're getting the Tesla guys. Oh, look, we got 2 judges. Again, at this point, there were over 400 January 6ers incarcerated. They arrested them before they even had the cases built.
Right.
And I'm not saying that we should jeopardize legitimate prosecutions. All right. Those take time. I want those buttoned up. I'm a process guy. I don't want to weaponize the process. But there are corrective mechanisms that should have been put into place on day one, like the quota system that the FBI has and still has, like the intelligence gathering apparatus that the FBI has and still has, like the executive order that's been signed by the Barack Obama administration that is still in place that allows the FBI unfettered access to what the NSA collects on American citizens without a warrant or a subpoena. That still exists. Like the playbook that they use continually where they entrap people into doing things that are their worst ideas that they're not predisposed to do or even capable of doing so that they can spring the trap and blame them as a domestic terrorist. These are day one policies. These aren't legislative actions. These are not laws that Congress has passed and said you must execute. These are discretionary policy decisions that could have been made by the DOJ and the FBI on day one, and they haven't been made.
Steve, what can we do about that? It's very interesting that you point out that some of these behaviors that are very problematic that involve a lot of what sounds to me like just dishonesty. It doesn't seem honest. It doesn't seem legitimate use of their power, certainly to entrap people into things they wouldn't be prone to do or capable of doing in order to build a story with a predetermined outcome. That's not justice. That's the farce that we saw in J6 and many other things. So it's not a law, as you mentioned, that Congress passed that the FBI must then execute on. It's discretionary policies related to protocol and how they conduct their operations and so forth, right? How can we expose this? How can we bring the agency to task, so to speak? FBI and otherwise. I mean, the whole federal government at large, same question. But yeah, what can we do specifically on that note? Because a lot of things do trace back to Congress, dereliction of duty by Congress. But this is not exactly one of those, which is very interesting. What can we do about that?
Yes, Congress has certainly empowered the executive offices and agencies and departments to basically do things that they shouldn't really do. I think that the demand needs to be on results oriented, but be very crystal clear about it. I mean, look, Deputy Director Bongino and Director Patel have been nonstop social media, and they seem to be very, very in tune to what social media is saying, which is right. Kind of funny to me. But the message that we have continually received since they've gotten into those positions is just trust me, bro. Look, it's not asking you to just trust me is never a good thing. We're in the do matters. The results matter, but you're just going to have to trust me. That's
the last few years. You've seen both of these guys, Cash and Dan, lay out evidence and go, look, day one, we've already got evidence these guys have done this. Yeah. It's already there. It's out in the open. So what are we trusting you for? This tells me that when, the FBI is an intelligence agency, now, pretty much. I mean, it's just drumming up information. So the way I see it, my opinion is that Cash walked in and goes, all right, all of the main people in the FBI are going, oh, all right, this guy's going to come in and thinks he's cleaning house. And he sits down at his desk at the director's office and they lay a folder on his desk and like, yeah, we know all this about you. Yeah, you're just going to shut the fuck up and my bad. Sorry, you're just going to shut up and business as usual. And I guarantee you that's what's going on right now. These guys came in there ready to clean house. And then someone goes, yeah, you're dirty and nothing's going to happen, man.
Or counterpoint, and it would be the same result. My contention is I think that there were basically two ways to go in. They talked about how they were going to go in, and that was shock and awe. That was metaphorical heads on pikes. We're going to remove people. We're going to make sweeping changes on day one. And then they instead went in with, we're going to win hearts and minds. And they went in with the fundamental belief that there are lots of really good men and women in the FBI. And if you go in with a lighter touch and recalibrate them to their default setting of rigorous obedience to the Constitution, that they will snap into that. And they underestimated the amount of resistance that they got. And they came in as outsiders, both the number one and the number two. And they have people who are experts at talking past you, using a vernacular that you're completely unfamiliar with, and could talk into you in a way that you think, oh, they know what they're doing. Oh, this guy, Steven Jensen, I don't really know him, but they say that he's a good company guy, that he's got an expertise in national security. Okay, he sounds qualified. Let's put him through. And they put their trust in that. And now they're also being told by people within human resources, not, hey, we've got the dirt on you. I'm sorry, I know you said you want to get rid of this list of 30 people, but we can't do that. It's not in policy. It's illegal. We can't do it because we'll get sued, X, Y, Z, etc. Whereas if they had people that surrounded them that knew that, no, you're the director, you're the deputy director, strike of a pen. It's done. Oh, you're the director, you're the deputy director, you can utilize things like the Supreme Court decision of Navy versus Egan, which says that our agency can suspend the clearance of anyone we want for any reason, and they can stay home unpaid, indefinitely, suspended forever until the end of time. Right. That's what the Supreme Court gave us, which is what they could have used. We don't have to fire anybody. You're just not getting paid. You're just not coming in. That's exactly what happened to me and the other whistleblowers, which is why we sit here 31 months later. That could have been used. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying it's a suboptimal circumstance, but it is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You can't roll into a metaphorical gunfight at the OK Corral where the other side has a gun and you roll in and say, we just have to follow the process. We have the Constitution. You're going to get rolled because you came in with we're going to win hearts and minds. And it needed shock and awe. It's always easier. And Joe, you were in the military. Leadership comes in hard. You can't come in as a player's coach. You got to be Bear Bryant. And then you can back it off at a later time. Well, the drill instructor doesn't come in and high-five you on day one.
Yeah. you can't be liked. To be a good leader, you can't be liked. You've got to come in with a game plan and you stick to
Gotta
what
be
you're going to
respected.
do and what you say you're going to do. And then people are going to respect you when they see
Right.
results. But you can't come in and go, well, I got to please everybody. Pleasers are not good leaders. You're just there in the position and you're letting people run all over you. You know, when you're in the military, you're a staff sergeant like that, you know, you've always got these guys that you came up with. But the reason you're a staff sergeant, they're still a private, is because, you know, you understand how to do it and you understand how to lead. And you can't sit there and listen to the opinions of soldiers all day when you know that what got you to where you are is being true to yourself and being true to what you believe in and doing the right thing and working hard to get there, you know. So we're not seeing a lot of that. You know, I want to see somebody come in and put their foot down and go, you know what? I don't care what you got on me. I don't care about this or that. This is what's going to happen. And we're going to do this. And you either toe the line or you get the hell out of the way. You know, we got to do something. We got to see some real leadership.
Amen. And I just want to say from my own personal experience, I am sick and tired of this. Oh, the rank and file are good people. I'm sick and tired of that garbage. The Bible makes it clear. You will know a tree by its fruit. The fruit of the FBI is rotten as hell. It stinks to high heaven. So I don't consider that a good tree.
The first people that are
that-
cast into the lake of fire are cowards, and that's just about
right.
all of them.
That's right. So I'm sick of this. Oh, the rank and file are good, or there's a lot of good people in the FBI. We're not buying it. That's not what the facts and the evidence bear out. So I think some shock and awe or some strong leadership and clearing out house, I think very much is necessary and needs to be called for. James, please weigh in. You know, we're going to jump into this persecution testimonial video so we can hear directly from a J6er. But I really want to key in for the audience, you know, for people listening who care about this issue, because this isn't just a chat to talk about stuff. wearej6.com. Please register and share, because this is an ongoing battle. We're in a war still. They tried to put me in, they did put me in prison at a J6 trial. The opening statement of the government against me was my tweet that said, "This is war." Because it is. But anyway, we are in a war, whether people are willing to acknowledge that or not. It's the truth. And in fighting that war, those of us who are awake and willing to participate and to defend innocence and justice in America, what can we do, James, right now related to these issues of a Trump administration that's in transition, institutions that are rife with corruption and bureaucratic bloat, you know, draining the swamp that never seems to get drained? What can we do specifically on those things at this time?
Hey, 1 second really quick. I got to go. I'm having a thing I got to go do really quick.
Of course. Thanks for joining us, Joe. We appreciate you.
Sorry, guys.
No problem. God bless.
Well, I think what we have to do is, where on earth are the congressional Republicans? What is this? Why do they work 1 week and then take 3 weeks off and then come back from work? They've done absolutely nothing. Okay. Absolutely nothing. It's time for there actually to be a spine and to have courage. And it's not just, I think what we learned for the J6 debacle was, again, the selective application of the law. Steve knows this. The FACE Act. It's being used, of course, to prosecute Catholic priests and nuns and Christian pro-life activists. When was the FACE Act used to persecute someone for attacking or damaging a house of worship, which is also what the FACE Act allows? That was the compromise, right? It's both the abortion clinic and the house of worship. It's never used for stuff like that when folks want to attack or burn down a Catholic church or a Baptist seminary. And so that is the issue here. And when you hear restorative justice, I mean, yes, there's a more nuanced descriptor of it, but it's also very simply, John, we want to restore justice as in the equal application of the law for everyone.
Amen. Amen. You hit it spot on the head there. So,
speaking of head, I do have to go get a haircut, sadly, so I have to bounce as well. But Steve, John, thank you for having me. Good to see you both, and keep up this work. It's really important.
Thank you for supporting us, James. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Steve, I'm going to launch this video and then just get a reaction from that.
It no longer serves the people. My name is Theo Hansen, and I live in Boise, Idaho. I originally attended, or thought to attend, Washington, D.C. in 2021 when I was requested by some health freedom fighters and some other individuals that we've been helping and working with in Southern California at the time. I didn't commit any violence. I didn't do any vandalism. I didn't disobey a single order from a law enforcement officer. There were no signs. There were no barricades. There was just a commotion as we arrived. I was charged with, shockingly, the 1512, which was that major interference of an investigation or a procedure that was applied to Enron. And I was also charged with like 5 other misdemeanors and 1 more felony, which all of them were exactly the same things, just sort of said different ways. I definitely felt coerced to accept a plea. I had a public defender, and they explained it to me in detail, and they thought that in the early days before evidence even being shared, that I was definitely guilty and that of something, and that I should take, seriously consider like a 10-year offer. Eventually 3 years was offered to me, but it was offered to me with a 14-page stipulation that I had to sign and confirm that I had met with people I've never met, that I had met with them in the morning of the 6th, which I didn't, that I met people in a hotel room I've never attended to, and that I had set out to overthrow my government. Justice requires that occasionally and accidentally someone gets tangled up into a system, and I can appreciate that, and I am a believer in the rule of law. I don't even have a good speeding ticket in my 55-year history on the planet, but I definitely am not a criminal, and I think that at some point there should have been some fail-safes, but a weaponized government who didn't care, who had 39% of its FBI force applied towards a single-day event, pursuing 1,600 people, and then punishing them far greater than had ever been seen with any kind of breach of the Capitol, which the breach of the Capitol is not new. But the punishment or the pain or the suffering that you receive is your whole world goes upside down. A lot of your family and friends move away from you. They're not sure what to do. Your good friends, you have to let them know that you have a warrant that allows the FBI to go 6 deep. And that means that my friend's friend phone can be tapped and listened to, or the warrant reaches whatever rights of that warrant reach and so that person's 6 people away. It's insane. And obviously for me, one of the biggest hits, I work as a real estate developer, and I also work in integrative oncology. So I go make money in real estate, and I come back and I bring it back so we can do more studies and provide more assistance for people who are going through very complicated cases in which we're looking for better outcomes. So for me, I have a real estate development project teed up, and then obviously the lenders are like, well, we can't loan to you. You're headed off to a pretty serious trial, and your chances of prevailing are low, and so it cripples you. So you stop making money, but more importantly is you lose any money that you have out, and then you begin to sort of you lose confidence, and being incarcerated and being bound and your legs cuffed and your arms cuffed and the FBI raiding your home, and then being told you can't have any force multipliers or weapons in the house of any sort. I can't have access to any of them. It leaves you just really exposed, waiting to find out the next thing that they're going to do to harass you after 3 years of harassment. So I think that the emotional toll and trauma for all of us is phenomenal. So I thought I was a passionate American going in to all this, but now I wonder where I sit in it. I'm angry, and there's a big part of me that isn't about restitution or even retribution. It's about the fact that government no longer serves the people. And so for how much longer will we agree to provide our consent to be governed? I wonder. I don't know what kind of restorative actions or justice can occur. I mean, money can heal parts of it, but it doesn't change the soul of it until the people who chose to use their authority to muzzle and to condemn people they disagreed with, until they're brought to justice, until we have a prevention for happening to the other side or to us again or to anybody again. Until that happens, I'm not sure I understand the restorative conversation. Am I entitled to money for false arrest and all those other things? Absolutely, and I'm seeking it, and I will get my pound of flesh plus a bunch more. But I want criminals to be perp walked. I want FBI agents who their commander had told them it wasn't an insurrection, and yet years later when they steal my property under false pretenses and they send that property for review, the request for investigation of my computers and my property, my phones, said insurrection J6. If your boss says that it's not an insurrection and you say it's an insurrection later and continue saying that, it's kind of a Freudian slip, and you are a bad person. When I was accused of 2 felonies and 5 misdemeanors and painted out to be a radical, my business was completely interrupted and hit the ground and could not restart until this was over. And it's still technically not even over. So after a year of trying, 8 months of trying to feed my family, to take care of my household, I took a project in another state just to go do construction work in my mid-50s, to physically move a shovel and work all day. And a wall separated off of a house and fell on me, and it broke my pelvis in 4 places. It crushed my lungs, broke my humerus instantly. My lungs collapsed, and I spent 2 months in an ICU bed. And I couldn't move my legs for weeks. And then I began to be able to move an ankle and then a knee, and then wondered what it would be like. And so now today I can stand and I can walk a short distance. But it'll be another couple years before maybe I get back to where I was. So I don't know, when we talk about the reputational harms, they're huge. And I don't care. And what are the financial empathy? They're huge. And I don't know that I care. The emotional and psychological. I'm pretty pissed off. Am I a different person than I was before J6? Or better or worse? I think I'm still the same good person, and I think I'm this. I'm Theo Hansen. I'm a J6 defendant. I'm one of thousands, 1,600. I was harmed by a weaponized government. There were other people who weren't arrested and were still harassed. Well, we are your American brothers and sisters, and we're more than hurting, and we were left behind. And a lot of people turned their backs, and only a handful of people continued to seek support for us. Please help us deliver a restorative justice to those that justice can be made. I've met men and women who lost their spouses, their children, their businesses, their cars, their homes.
The American people need to see these stories of political persecution. Please share them widely and join us at wearej6.com to help deliver restorative justice through victim recovery and government accountability.
Yeah. So, Steve, that's the latest in a series of persecution testimonials that we every week are just urging people to submit materials so that we can continue to share and platform their stories. People can, of course, register at wearej6.com, and we get you emails to help you figure out how to do all that and make it easy for you. But we just really believe in the mission of educating the American people, educating the public about the truth. And a big part of the truth is, who are these people? Who are we? As J6 former defendants, as American brothers and sisters, neighbors and coworkers, people like you and me all across the country that became a target of their own government. So we really want people to understand the truth about who the people are and about what has happened to them, what is still happening to them. It's heart-wrenching. And it's just a very, I'm at a loss, Steve, for how to really quantify this or contextualize it in terms of American history. I mean, I describe J6 as our American Reichstag fire moment. And the fallout from this, I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's tragic, and it's indicative of problems that pose a lot of danger for every American. And I think that's why we should all really care about this and invest in the pursuit of restorative justice.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, his story there, Theo's story, is incredibly moving. And the fact that it's not a one-off, that it was, he's one of a fairly sizable portion of people who have a story like that to tell. I mean, he seems like I've never met him, but it seems like a pretty honorable guy, pretty straight shooter, and he's endured a lot of tragedy. His family has suffered enormously, as have many others. But I just want to highlight one element of the story that he told there, and that was he was made to stand up in a court of law for the government, which he was a patriot for, and lie, and lie, tell a lie that everyone in there that suborned perjury. That's a felony. Everyone there, including the judge, knew that they were forcing that man to utter things that were not true about himself, to impugn his own character at the risk of suffering even greater. That is what happened in Soviet Russia.
Right.
That's exactly what happened. I mean, it's unprecedented for this country, but it's not unprecedented in the time of man.
Right.
And everybody likes to think that we are at the end of history, right? Like if something new and big was going to happen, surely it would have been in my book when I was in school, right? Everything's just going to stay the same. We are always on a razor's edge of devolving into something like that. And we absolutely did. It didn't get as bad as Mao's China or Stalin's Soviet Union, but we were a hair's breadth away from getting to that point. And we have an opportunity now to go through a restorative justice. And that includes holding people accountable who did that to people like Theo, bonding together in order to make sure that we help to take care of guys like him and others who suffered similarly. And then also, people that were along the way, the few that actually did throw out the flag and say, like, hey, what we're doing is wrong here, who were rolled, like my buddies, who have still been ignored. All of us need to find common cause in that. And, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this platform with you and to reach this audience so that people know that, I'm still out here. I'm having an Isaiah 6:8. I've recognized the hill that I'm on, and who shall I send? That's not me jumping out of my seat. It's just me recognizing that this is the hill we have to fight on. And I think that you recognize that about yourself, as bum rap as you got, and as Theo got, and then to a certain extent, I got, like, we actually got the flashing neon sign that said, "This is your hill." And I think others didn't necessarily get it as loudly advertised to them, but invite them to join us on this journey.
Well said, Steve. I'm very grateful for your courage and in general, and specifically for joining us at wearej6.com. Steve, please tell everyone how they can find you and support what your efforts are as you fight on your hill.
Well, the best place to find me is social media. At Real Steve Friend is the handle on X. You see there from on my descriptor there. I have a podcast 3 days a week. It's called the American Radicals Podcast, and that's on Rumble, 10:30 on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But you can always catch up if you missed the live stream, and it's also on audio formats in Spotify, iHeart, and iTunes. So we cover down on this sort of stuff 3 days a week, and I encourage anybody who wants to just catch up on that to give us a follow and give us a chance. And also just keep all the pressure on now. Now is the time not to celebrate winning the Super Bowl. You didn't win the election and win the Super Bowl. Now we're into 2-a-days. The whole season's ahead of you. You have to be willing to press the pedal to the metal and pressure the people who are in charge to do the right thing.
Amen. I love that analogy, and I couldn't agree more. So yeah, the time is now. The pressure is on. That's what wearej6.com is about, and hopefully that's what Americans are about. There's a lot of work to do, both J6 and otherwise. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, James Fishback and Joe Biggs, also for joining us. You guys, please register at wearej6.com and share it. Just continue to invest in this American experiment. Continue to engage and do the hard work that God has called each and every one of us to do in pursuit of restorative justice, and the preservation of liberty and justice for all Americans in this country. It falls on our shoulders. That's where it should be. So thanks again, Steve. You were great. Everyone was fantastic today. God bless you guys. We will, of course, see you next Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, we'll be on social. Definitely please continue to support Steve Friend and the other FBI whistleblowers as they champion that specific issue, which I think is really important. So we do need to keep the pressure on. And thank you for doing that, Steve.
You got it. Thanks again.
Absolutely. God bless everybody. And we will see you next time. Cheers.